All right, so today we are going to be doing a deep dive into DAX.
Ooh, exciting.
It is exciting.
Yeah.
I have to admit, when I first opened up this document that you
Yeah.
sent me about it, I was a little overwhelmed.
Yeah, it's a lot to take in.
It is, and it's organized really well
Right.
into these nice categories.
Yeah.
But I'm not even sure what some of these categories mean.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm hoping you can maybe help me make sense of this.
Absolutely, yeah.
So let's just jump right in.
Okay.
What is DAX?
Well, DAX stands for Data Analysis Expressions.
Okay.
And essentially, it's this formula language
Right.
that you can use to define custom calculations and create really powerful insights within your data models.
Okay, so it's almost like,
Yeah,
I mean, you can use it in Power BI.
that's right. Yeah,
You can use it in other tools.
exactly. You can use it in Power Pivot,
Okay.
SQL Server Analysis Services.
Yeah.
So it has a lot of applications.
So it's basically like this set of tools that you
Yes.
can use to manipulate your data
Exactly.
and sort of get it to tell you what you want it to tell you.
It's like having a custom set of analysis tools tailored to your specific needs.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Because when I first looked at this document, it's like,
Right.
oh my gosh, this is,
A lot.
it's almost like learning a new language.
It is. It's a formula language,
Wow.
so it has its own syntax,
Right.
and it has its own functions.
Right.
But it's really powerful once you kind of get the hang of it.
So let's talk about some of these categories because,
Okay.
like I said, they're nicely organized,
Yeah.
but they're still a little bit abstract to me.
Sure.
Like aggregation functions.
Okay.
What is an aggregation function?
So aggregation functions are basically ways of combining multiple values into a single result.
Okay.
So think about it like summarizing your data.
Okay.
So you have a bunch of different data points,
Yeah.
and you want to get like a big picture view.
Okay.
So you could use an aggregation function to do that.
Like sum.
Like sum, exactly.
Okay.
So sum will add up a bunch of different values
Right.
and give you the total.
So if I have a list of all of my sales,
Exactly.
I could use sum to figure out my total sales.
Exactly. You could say, give me the sum of all the sales in this column,
Okay.
and it'll give you one number
Yep.
that represents the total.
Got it. Okay.
There are other aggregation functions, like average.
Okay.
So if you wanted to find like the average price of a product or something, you could use average.
Or the average age
That's
of
right.
my customers. Okay.
There's max,
Oh.
which will find the highest value in a set of data.
Like the maximum price I've ever sold something for.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
So there's a lot of different aggregation functions, but they all kind of have that same idea of like
Okay.
taking multiple values and kind of boiling it down to a single.
Right. Summarizing it.
Yeah, summarizing it.
Okay. And they're different from something like sum X.
Yes. So sum X is a little bit different.
Okay.
So sum will just add up a column of numbers.
Yeah.
Sum X is a little bit more powerful because it lets you perform a calculation on each row of a table
Okay.
and then sum up the results of those calculations.
Interesting. So it's like sum,
Yeah,
but with an extra step.
exactly.
Okay.
So you're not just adding up the numbers that are already there.
Yeah.
You're actually doing something to those numbers first
Okay.
and then adding up the results.
So if I wanted to add, let's say, a discount
Yes.
to each of those sales before summing them,
Exactly.
I could use sum X.
Exactly. You could use sum X to say,
Okay.
for each row in this table,
Yep.
apply this discount,
Okay.
and then sum up all the discounted prices.
Got it.
So it's a lot more powerful.
Okay, so we're not just talking about simple addition.
No,
we're
right.
talking about
It's more like a mini formula
Right.
that you're applying to each row
and then adding it.
and then adding it up.
That's powerful.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this is more than just like
Yeah.
basic math.
All right.
Okay, so we've got aggregation functions.
Yeah.
We've got sum and sum X.
Uh-huh.
What about date and time functions?
Date and time functions. Those are really important.
I would imagine so.
Yeah,
Because a lot of our data is time-based.
exactly. I mean, anytime you're working with data that has a time component,
Right.
you're going to need to use date and time functions.
Because data without a date is almost meaningless.
Exactly, yeah. You need that context of when things happened
Right.
to really understand the data.
Yeah. Okay, so what are some examples?
So some examples of date and time functions. There's a function called dateDiff,
Okay.
and that calculates the difference between two dates.
So if I wanted to see
Yeah.
how long it took something to ship,
Exactly.
I could use date.
You could say, okay, what's the date diff between the order date
Okay.
and the shipping date? And it'll give you the number of days or weeks or months,
Wow.
whatever unit you specify.
Okay.
There's a function called year,
Okay.
which extracts the year from a date.
So I could see all of my sales from 2022.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. There's a function called today,
Okay.
which gives you the current date.
So that's good if you're making like
Yeah.
a dynamic report.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then there's a really cool function called same period last year.
Ooh, that sounds useful.
Yeah, this one's super helpful for comparing your current performance
Right.
to the same period last year.
Oh, that's so helpful for a business.
It is, yeah. It's a really common business scenario.
Yeah, to look at like month over month,
Yeah.
year over year.
Exactly.
Okay, so that makes a lot of sense.
Mhm.
So we've got date and time functions.
Yeah.
We've got aggregation functions.
Yeah.
The next category is filter functions.
Ah, filter functions.
And that sounds pretty self-explanatory.
It does, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's more powerful than you might think. So filter functions essentially allow you to focus on specific subsets of data.
Okay.
So it's like you have this big data set
Right.
and you want to zoom in
Okay.
on a particular area of that data.
Got it.
So you can use filter functions to do that.
Like if I wanted to see all the sales
Yeah,
from a specific region,
exactly.
I could filter
You could use a filter function.
by region.
Yep.
Okay.
And it would show you just the sales from that region.
Okay. What are some of the filter functions?
So some of the key filter functions are filter,
Okay.
calculate, and all else. So filter is kind of the most basic one.
Right.
It allows you to create a subset of data
Okay.
based on some criteria.
Okay.
So you could say, okay, give me all the customers who have spent more than $100,
Okay.
and it'll give you a table
Okay.
of just those customers.
So it's kind of like a search function almost?
It's kind of like a search function. Yeah.
Yeah.
Calculate is a little bit more complex. It allows you to modify existing calculations
Okay.
by applying filters.
Okay.
So you could say, okay, calculate the average sales, but only for customers in this region.
Oh, I see.
So you're taking an existing calculation
Right.
and you're adding a filter to it.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then all L is kind of the opposite of filter.
Okay.
So filter narrows things down.
Yeah.
All L expands things out.
So if I had a filter on it and I wanted to see everything, or
Exactly.
we use all L.
Exactly. You would use all L to remove all the filters
Got it.
and see the full data set.
Okay, these are sounded really handy.
They are. Yeah. Filter functions are super useful.
Yeah, because I mean, I can imagine
Yeah.
if you've got just this massive amount of data,
It can be overwhelming.
being able to filter it down is
Yeah.
super helpful.
Yeah. You need those tools to kind of like sift through the data and find what you're looking for.
Okay, so we've got aggregation functions, date and time functions, filter functions. The next category is information functions.
Okay.
What are those all about?
So information functions are basically functions that give you information about your data.
Okay.
So they don't really do any calculations. They just tell you things about the data.
So it's more about like understanding your data.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like
Okay.
inspecting your data.
Okay.
So for example, there's a function called is blank,
Okay.
and that tells you whether a cell is empty or not.
So that's good for like data cleaning.
Exactly. Yeah. It's really helpful for data cleaning.
Yep.
You can use it to identify missing values.
Right.
There's a function called isNumber,
Okay.
which tells you whether a value is a number or not.
Okay. So that would prevent you from trying to do a calculation with
Yes,
DAX.
exactly. It can help you avoid errors.
Right.
So there's a lot of different information functions, but they all kind of have that same idea of like
Ready.
just giving you information about your data.
Information functions. Okay, so the next category is logical functions.
Logical functions.
And that sounds like it's where things start to get really interesting.
Yeah, this is where DAX starts to get a little bit more like programming.
Okay.
So logical functions allow you to build conditions into your calculations.
Okay.
So you can say, okay, if this is true, then do this, otherwise do that.
So it's like if-then statements.
Exactly, like if-then-else statements.
Okay.
So for example, there's a function called IFI,
Okay.
and that's kind of the most basic logical function.
Right.
It allows you to evaluate a condition
Okay.
and then perform different actions,
Got it.
depending on whether that condition is true or false.
Okay, so let's say if I wanted to give a customer a discount,
Exactly.
if they spend over a certain amount,
You could use an IF function for that.
I could say if the total sales are greater than $100, then apply a 10% discount.
Exactly. There are other logical functions like AND and OR.
Okay.
So AND allows you to combine multiple conditions.
Okay.
So you say, okay, if the customer spends more than $100, and they've been a customer for more than a year,
Right.
then give them a discount.
I see.
OR is similar,
Okay.
but it only requires one of the conditions to be true.
Okay.
So you can say, okay, if the customer spends more than $100
Yeah.
or they've been a customer for more than a year,
Mm-hmm.
then give them a discount.
Okay, so A and D, they both have to be true.
Exactly.
Or only one has to be true.
Exactly.
Got it.
So logical functions allow you to build these really complex conditions into your calculations.
So that's how you would like personalize things or like
Okay.
do different things based on different criteria?
Yep, you can build like decision trees
Wow.
within your calculations.
This is getting powerful.
It is. Yeah. It's really cool stuff.
All right, so we've got aggregation functions,
Yeah.
date and time, filter functions,
Huh.
information functions, and logical functions.
Exactly.
We've got a lot more to go.
We do.
Well, we're going to take a break.
Okay.
We'll be right back.
Sounds good.
All right, so last time we talked about all these different functions in DAX.
Yeah, we covered a lot of ground,
We did.
a lot of different categories.
And
Yeah.
it's starting to make more sense to me now.
Good.
But I feel like we need to back up a little bit.
Okay.
And talk about some of the core concepts.
Yeah.
The foundation of what makes DAX tick.
Exactly. Yeah.
So let's talk about the building blocks.
Okay.
What are the essential elements?
So the essential elements of DAX.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, you have data types.
Okay, data types.
Yeah. So DAX recognizes different types of data.
Okay.
You have numbers.
Okay.
You have text. You have dates.
Okay.
Booleans,
Yeah.
which are true or false values.
Got it.
And understanding these data types is important
Okay.
because DAX handles them differently.
So it's like telling DAX what kind of data it's working with.
Exactly. You're kind of classifying your data
Right.
so that DAX knows how to treat it.
Because you wouldn't want to do math with words.
Exactly. Yeah, you wouldn't want to try to add text strings together
Right.
or, divide a date by a number.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's important to understand the data types.
Okay.
Another important concept is variables.
Variable.
Yeah. So variables in DAX are basically containers
Okay.
that hold values.
Okay.
So you can use them to store intermediate results
Okay.
or to make your formulas more readable.
So it's like a placeholder almost?
Exactly. It's like a placeholder.
Okay.
So let's say you're calculating a really complex formula,
Okay.
and it involves multiple steps.
Right.
You can use variables to store the results of each step
Okay.
so that your formula is not just like one giant mess.
Well, it's more organized.
Exactly. It's more organized.
Okay.
And it's easier to debug if something goes wrong.
Right, because you can see like, okay, this variable is wrong.
Exactly.
Yeah, I get it.
And then another important concept is operators.
Operators.
Yeah, so operators are basically symbols
Okay.
that perform specific actions on values.
Okay.
So you have arithmetic operators.
Like plus, minus, multiply, divide.
Exactly. Plus, minus, multiply, divide.
Okay.
You have comparison operators.
Okay.
Like greater than, less than, equal to.
Mm-hmm.
And you have logical operators.
Wait, Andy and or.
Exactly, like Andy and or.
Okay.
So operators are basically the verbs of your DAX language.
Okay, so they're telling DAX what to do.
Exactly. They're telling DAX what to do with the
Okay.
values.
Got it.
So those are kind of the three main building blocks.
Okay, so we've got data types,
Yeah.
variables, and operators.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now how does this all fit together
Okay.
in a data model?
So in a data model,
Yeah.
DAX is used to define calculated columns,
Okay, calculated.
measures,
Mhm.
and custom tables.
Okay, so let's break those down one by one.
All right.
What's a calculated column?
So a calculated column is basically a new column that you add to an existing table.
Okay.
And the values in that column are calculated based on other columns in the table.
Okay, so if I had a table of my products
Exactly.
and I wanted to add a column that showed the profit margin,
Exactly.
I could use a calculated column
You could use a calculated column for...
to figure that out
Yep.
based on the cost of the product and the sale price.
Exactly.
Okay, that's really handy.
Yeah, it's super helpful.
Okay, so that's a calculated column.
Mm-hmm.
What about a measure?
So a measure is a little bit different.
Okay.
A measure is a calculation
Okay.
that operates on aggregated data.
So it's like a summary.
It's like a summary.
Okay.
Yeah. So for example, you could have a measure
Uh-huh.
that calculates the total sales for a particular month
Okay.
or the average customer rating.
Okay.
So measures are typically used.
It's in visualizations, like
Right.
charts and graphs.
Where's the number that shows up in the chart?
Exactly. It's the number that shows up in the chart.
Okay.
And then a custom table is basically a new table
Okay.
that you create
Aye.
based on existing data.
Okay.
So you can use DAX to reshape your data and create a new table.
So if my data isn't structured the way I want it,
exactly,
I can use DAX to restructure it.
You can create a custom table
that's
organized the way you want it.
So we can do a lot with DAX.
Yeah, DAX is really powerful.
It's not just about writing formulas.
Yeah.
It's about
understanding your data and manipulating it.
Shaping it.
Yeah, shaping it, exactly.
Okay. This is making me feel like I need to go back and reread that document.
I think that's a good idea.
With fresh eyes.
Yeah.
Now that I understand some of these core concepts.
Now that you have the foundation,
it'll
make more sense. Okay, so we've got data types, we've got variables, we've got operators, we've got calculated columns, we've got measures, and we've got custom tables.
That's right.
Okay.
That's a lot.
It is a lot.
But it's all really cool stuff.
It is cool stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've spent a lot of time talking about the technical side of DAX.
Yeah, we've really gone deep.
But I think it's time to see how DAX can be applied in the real world.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's see it in action.
Let's talk about some case studies.
Okay.
So how are businesses actually using DAX?
All right, so let's start with retail.
Okay, retail.
So imagine a large retail chain.
Okay.
They want to personalize their marketing campaigns, boost sales.
Right.
They have tons of data on customer demographics, purchase history browsing patterns.
Yeah, that's the kind of stuff they track these days.
Exactly. So with DAX, they can analyze this data to identify which products are frequently purchased together.
Ooh, interesting.
Yeah, so then they can create targeted product bundles and promotions.
So if somebody buys this thing, they're also likely to buy this other thing.
Exactly.
So you can bundle them together. And increase sales.
Increase sales, exactly.
That's smart.
Another thing they can do is analyze customer churn.
Okay, customer churn.
Yeah, so why are customers leaving?
Right.
Are they having a bad experience? Are they finding better prices elsewhere?
Okay.
So DAX can help identify those patterns.
So they can address them.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's retail. What about finance?
Finance is another great example.
Okay.
So investment firms use DAX to track the performance of their portfolios.
Okay.
They can build these really sophisticated financial models that take into account all sorts of factors.
So it's not just like looking at a spreadsheet.
That's much more advanced than that.
Okay.
They can also use DAX to simulate different investment scenarios. Oh, wow.
Yeah, so they can say, okay, what if interest rates go up?
Yeah.
What if the stock market crashes?
How will that affect?
How will that affect our portfolio?
Wow.
And DAX can help them kind of play out those scenarios.
Okay, so you can kind of predict the future a little bit.
Kind of. Yeah, it's not perfect.
Right.
But it gives you a better idea of...
of what might happen?
Of what might happen.
Okay, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
What about healthcare?
Healthcare is another great example.
I was going to say,
yeah,
healthcare is so data-driven these days.
It is, yeah. I mean, they have electronic health records. They have clinical trial results. So they're using DAX to analyze all of that data, to identify trends, to track patient outcomes, to develop predictive models.
So you could predict if somebody is at risk for certain disease.
Exactly.
Wow.
So DAX is really having a big impact on healthcare.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Okay, so we've talked about retail, finance, healthcare. What about marketing?
Marketing is another big one.
Yeah.
So marketers are using DAX to measure the effectiveness of their campaigns.
So things like website traffic.
Exactly. Website traffic, social media engagement.
Conversion rates.
Yep.
All that stuff.
Yeah. And they can use DAX to create these really detailed reports. That show them exactly what's working and what's not.
So you can kind of see where you're getting the best return on your investment.
Exactly.
Okay.
And they can also use DAX to segment their customers. So they can target different groups of customers with different messages.
So it's like personalized marketing.
Exactly, like personalized marketing.
Wow.
Yeah.
So DAX is really all over the place.
It is. It's a really versatile tool.
It is.
Yeah.
So this has been fascinating.
I'm glad you enjoyed it.
I have learned so much about DAX.
Good.
I feel like I have a much better understanding.
That's great to hear.
Of how it works.
Yeah.
And how it can be used to solve real-world problems.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive.
It was my pleasure.
I'm sure our listeners have learned a lot too.
I hope so.
And I'm excited to see what the future holds for DAX.
Me too. It's a really exciting field.
It is.
Yeah.
So until next time,
Huh?
happy data exploring.
Happy data exploring.